My name is Amanda Collins. For years, I worked harder than I ever thought possible to build my career. And for a long time, I thought I had made it. I was a senior project manager at a mid-sized tech company. I had been with the company for nearly 10 years, climbing step by step, proving myself, sacrificing weekends, vacations, and even time with my family just to deliver on every impossible deadline they threw at me. My work was my pride. My boss, David, always told me how valuable I was to the company. "You're the backbone of this place," he used to say. He trusted me with major projects, clients, and decisions. At least that's what I thought. I trained new hires, managed teams, and was even promised that a promotion to director was just around the corner. It felt like everything I worked for was finally paying off. But I had no idea that behind closed doors, David was making other plans. Plans that would leave me blindsided, humiliated, and betrayed. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I worked for everything I had. After college, while many of my classmates took gap years or backpacked through Europe, I was working 2 part-time jobs, during the day as an office assistant, at night waiting tables, just to pay off my student loans and get a foot in the door. That's when I first joined the company. I was 24 years old, entry level, no real experience, no connections, just ambition. At first, no one noticed me. But I made sure my work spoke for itself. I stayed late. I volunteered for every project no one else wanted. I learned skills outside of my job description just to make myself useful. Slowly, my managers began to see my value. Promotions came, not easily, but one by one. First to project coordinator, then junior project manager, then finally senior project manager. David became my direct supervisor when I was promoted. He seemed supportive, always praising my work ethic, saying I was exactly the kind of person this company needs. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He mentored me, gave me more responsibilities, trusted me to handle the biggest clients. The promotion to director of operations was supposed to be next. David had even told me during my last annual review, "It's only a matter of time, Amanda. You've earned it." I thought loyalty, hard work, and dedication would protect me. I thought wrong, because while I was building my career, someone else was sneaking in from behind. A few months after my last performance review, David called me into his office. "We're bringing someone new onto the team," he said. "Her name is Chloe." I didn't think much of it. New hires were normal. We were expanding, and I was already handling more projects than I could count. Chloe arrived a week later. She was younger, probably late 20s, very attractive, polished, and confident. She introduced herself warmly, and I welcomed her like I would any new teammate. I even offered to help her settle into the office, teach her some of the internal systems, and guide her through some of our more complicated clients. But almost immediately, I noticed something odd. David was extremely involved with her onboarding, far more than usual. He sat in on her training sessions personally, assigned her high-level projects that typically took years to earn, and included her in meetings with clients I had been managing for years. Within the first month, Chloe was given responsibilities that even some of my senior colleagues hadn't touched yet. David praised her constantly, in team meetings, in emails, even in casual office conversations. "She just gets it," he would say. "She's exactly what we need for the future of this department." At first, I didn't let it bother me. I'd been at the company for years. I knew my value. Maybe she was simply talented, or David saw potential in her. And honestly, I was so buried in my own workload that I didn't have the energy to get involved in office politics. I reminded myself to stay professional, do my job, ignore the favoritism, focus on the promotion I was still promised. But looking back now, that was the moment everything started shifting, and I was too loyal to see it. That night started like any other. After dinner, I was doing some light work from home when I suddenly realized I had forgotten one of the client files I needed for the next morning's presentation. Frustrated with myself, I grabbed my keys and decided to quickly drive back to the office. It was already late, but the building was only a short drive away. When I arrived, I noticed that a few lights were still on inside, but that wasn't unusual. David often stayed late, going over reports or having late calls with international clients. I didn't think twice. I quietly entered, went straight to my desk, grabbed the folder I needed, and was about to head out. On my way, I figured I would quickly stop by David's office, out of simple courtesy, just to let him know I was locking up for the night. I gently knocked once on his door, and without waiting for a response, I opened it slightly. And there they were, David and Chloe, on his desk, wrapped around each other, completely lost in the moment. They didn't even notice me at first, but when they did, everything froze. David's face turned ghostly pale. Chloe gasped, quickly adjusting herself and looking down in shame. I stood there, frozen for a brief second, feeling like my stomach had dropped straight to the floor. The man who had praised me, mentored me, promised me that promotion, the man who had been like a professional ally for years, was now completely exposed. Without saying a word, I turned around and walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just left. David started calling my name, scrambling after me, but I didn't stop. I got into my car, drove home, and shut off my phone as soon as I walked through the door. The adrenaline wore off as soon as I stepped into the shower. I stood under the hot water, shaking, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Part of me felt sick. Part of me was numb. That night, I crawled into bed without saying a word to anyone. David called over and over. I watched the screen light up again and again. I never answered, because in that moment, I realized something far worse than office favoritism had been happening right in front of me, and I had no idea how deep this betrayal really went. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work like nothing happened. As I walked into the office, everything looked completely normal. People chatting at the coffee machine, typing away at their desks, talking about their weekend plans. No one suspected that behind my calm smile, my world had shifted overnight. I sat at my desk, pretending to work while my mind was racing. I couldn't stop seeing them, David and Chloe, in that moment. I tried to stay composed, but within minutes, my phone rang. It was David. "Amanda, can you step into my office, please?" I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked in, closing the door behind me. David looked pale and nervous, not at all like the confident man I had always known. "Amanda, listen," he started quietly. "First of all, I want to apologize. You weren't supposed to see that. You walked in at a really bad time." I stared at him, holding back my rage. "You think that's the issue? That I walked in? You're married, David. You have children. And you're sneaking around with an employee half your age." He rubbed his hands over his face, clearly embarrassed. I know how bad this looks." I shook my head. "You're not just risking your marriage. If HR or upper management finds out about this, you'll be fired immediately." David leaned forward, lowering his voice. "That's why I need your discretion, Amanda. Please. No one else needs to know about this." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to cover for you?" He hesitated. "Look, Amanda, you've been with this company a long time. You know how things work. I don't want this to affect either of our careers, especially yours." I felt my stomach turn. "I've worked my entire life to get here, David, and now you're asking me to lie to protect you? This goes against everything I believe in." He gave me that familiar management tone he always used when he wanted to control a situation. "Amanda, your promotion is coming soon. The director position. It's practically done. You've earned it. Let's not let this complicate things." His words made me feel sick. He was dangling my promotion like bait, using my own career as leverage. I nodded slightly, not out of agreement, but because I needed to get out of that room before I said something I couldn't take back. As I left his office, I knew one thing. I had worked too hard to let this man ruin my career. But I also knew I couldn't stay silent forever, because sooner or later, every secret finds its way to the surface. Weeks passed after that meeting. I kept my mouth shut, for now. But inside, the resentment was eating me alive. At first, nothing seemed different. I still managed my projects, attended meetings, and led my team. But then, slowly, I started noticing subtle changes, the kind that feel small at first, but when you add them up, They scream the truth. Chloe started sitting in on meetings she never used to attend. She was now copied on confidential emails that were once only sent to me. And then came the real gut punch. She was suddenly assigned to lead one of my long-term client accounts. When I confronted David about it, he smiled calmly. "We're just giving Chloe more experience, Amanda. She's new, but she's promising. You're still in charge of plenty." Plenty? I had carried this company on my back for years. The worst part was how openly Chloe enjoyed it. She smiled at me during meetings with a kind of smug politeness, like she knew exactly what was happening but enjoyed watching me pretend not to notice. The office whispers started too. People noticed how quickly Chloe was rising, how David praised her in every meeting, how she seemed to get everything handed to her overnight. But no one said anything out loud, because David was still the boss. Every day I walked into that office and smiled, but inside I was burning. I could have stayed quiet, taken my promotion, and lived with the guilt. But I couldn't, because now it wasn't just an affair. David was replacing me, both professionally and personally, with his mistress. And he expected me to be grateful for the scraps. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to be the loyal, obedient employee anymore. If David and Chloe thought they could use me to protect their little secret and slowly push me out, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. For weeks, I lived in constant doubt. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe David wasn't really planning to replace me. Maybe, despite everything, my promotion was still coming. We had discussed it so many times over the past year. David had reassured me at every performance review, every one-on-one meeting. "This role is yours, Amanda. You've earned it." So when the company finally announced the staff-wide meeting to reveal the new director of operations, I walked in feeling nervous, but prepared. This was supposed to be my moment. Everyone gathered in the conference room. The executives, department heads, senior staff, all there. Even Chloe sat toward the front, smiling politely, acting as if she was simply there to support whoever was chosen. David stood at the podium, clearing his throat. He gave a long speech about the company's growth, our recent challenges, and how leadership needed to evolve for the future. I was barely listening. I was too focused on trying to control my racing heart. Then came the moment. "And now," David said with a big smile, "it gives me great pleasure to officially announce the promotion for Director of Operations. Chloe." Time froze. I couldn't breathe. I heard gasps around the room. Whispers, confused murmurs. Someone, I don't even know who, had the courage to say what everyone was thinking. "Wait, Chloe? But she's only been here a year. What about Amanda?" The room went dead silent. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to say something, to object, to fight back. But I didn't. Because if I said anything in that moment, it wouldn't be calm or professional. It would be rage. And rage never wins. I simply smiled, forced myself to clap politely, and said, "Congratulations, Chloe." Then I returned to my desk, numb, while inside my entire world was shattering. And in that moment, one thing became clear. David and Chloe had taken everything from me. My promotion, my trust, my dignity. But what they didn't know was that I had finally reached the point where I was ready to destroy them. After that public humiliation, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't accuse them yet. Not without proof. If I spoke up now, everyone would assume I was just bitter and jealous, that I couldn't handle losing the promotion, that I was trying to destroy Chloe out of spite. I needed evidence, solid, undeniable evidence. And I was going to get it, but working under Chloe now felt like slow torture. She was sitting at my old desk, managing the team I had built, taking credit for my work. And David? He avoided me like the plague, no doubt hoping I'd eventually quit and make things easier for them both. But I stayed, because patience was my weapon now. And then, unexpectedly, my opportunity came. One afternoon, I overheard David on the phone while passing by his office. He was chatting casually with one of his friends, laughing loudly. Yeah, I'll see you tonight at the game. Box seats, buddy. Should be a late one." The moment I heard those words, something clicked inside me. He wouldn't be coming back to the office tonight. This was my chance. Later that evening, once it was dark and the office was closed, I returned. My heart was racing as I swiped my security badge and walked in. The building was empty, silent. I knew that David always kept personal files locked in his office. His desk drawers, the filing cabinet, even his private computer that he never let anyone touch. I pulled out a small flash drive I had brought with me. If there was anything incriminating, emails, documents, hidden financial records, it would be on his computer. As I quietly searched his office, I couldn't help but think, "You underestimated me, David. Tonight would be the beginning of the end." As I sat at David's desk, hands shaking, I inserted my flash drive and opened his personal email. Within seconds, everything I had suspected came pouring onto the screen. Dozens, no, hundreds, of emails between him and Chloe. Not just simple work messages. These were personal, intimate, and highly inappropriate for the workplace. Sexy photos she had sent him, taken right there at the office, some even in his chair, wearing outfits that were far from professional. And all sent during work hours from her company email on company time. I scrolled through email threads where they flirted back and forth while major client deals sat waiting in their inboxes. They joked about fooling everyone, about how no one, especially me, suspected anything. But then I saw something else. A folder. It was oddly named, not something a financial executive would normally keep, almost like it was meant to blend in but catch no attention. Out of curiosity, or maybe instinct, I clicked. That's when my breath completely caught. Inside were dozens of financial documents, spreadsheets, contracts, invoices, none of which should have been stored here. As I opened document after document, the truth unfolded like a nightmare. David wasn't just cheating on his wife and abusing company policy. He had been funneling company money for years, forging vendor contracts, falsifying invoices, and creating fake consulting fees that all led back to private accounts under his name. He had racked up huge debts with outside vendors, using company credit to fund his own private expenses, luxury vacations, private memberships, even investments into personal side businesses that had failed miserably. He was drowning in personal debt and using company funds to keep up appearances. I sat there frozen, sick to my stomach. This wasn't just office politics anymore. This wasn't just a disgusting affair. This was corporate fraud, federal crime. He could lose everything. And now, I had it all. Proof of his affair, proof of his financial crimes, proof of everything. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Because now, it wasn't about whether or not people would believe me. Now I had the power to end both of them. After that night, I barely slept. Not because I was scared anymore, but because I knew exactly what I had to do. For months, David controlled the game, but now the game was mine. I didn't confront David. I didn't confront Chloe. I skipped them both completely. This wasn't office gossip anymore. This was criminal. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with the executive board, the CEO, the head of HR, and the company's legal counsel. I was calm, professional, prepared. As I sat down, they smiled politely, expecting another HR complaint or minor issue. "What can we help you with, Amanda?" the CEO asked. I looked directly at them and said, "This isn't a complaint. It's a legal matter, one that puts this entire company at risk." Their smiles faded. I began. First, I laid out the affair. How David and Chloe had engaged in an inappropriate relationship under company time, on company property, using company resources. I presented the emails, the photos, the messages. At first, they exchanged uncomfortable glances. The head of HR gave a weak laugh and said, "Well, unfortunately, these kinds of personal relationships happen more than we'd like around here. Obviously inappropriate, but nothing we can't address internally." I nodded calmly. "Oh, I know, but that's not why I asked for this meeting." Their expressions shifted. I then slid a separate folder across the table. "This is why I'm here." They opened the documents, all carefully organized: copies of fraudulent invoices, forged contracts, unauthorized transactions, fake vendors, bank statements showing company funds being rerouted into David's private accounts, debt records, failed private investments. The further they flipped through the pages, the paler their faces became. The CEO whispered under his breath, "Good God, he's been with us over 20 years. The legal counsel shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't just termination. This is federal fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud. We're talking prison time." I sat back in my chair and simply said, "I thought you should know." The room fell into absolute silence. At that moment, I knew David's career was over. And so was Chloe's. Within 24 hours, everything began to unravel. The board moved fast, much faster than I expected. David was called in for an immediate emergency meeting the following morning. From what I later heard, they confronted him with the evidence I had presented. There was no way out. His face reportedly went white as they laid the files in front of him. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply handed David a letter terminating his contract, effective immediately. Company security escorted him from the building that same morning, in front of everyone. As for Chloe, she was called into HR an hour later. Without David protecting her, the company easily traced her involvement. Knowingly engaging in a relationship with her superior, receiving favoritism, sharing confidential information, and participating in inappropriate conduct during work hours. She was fired on the spot. By lunchtime, both of them were gone. And me? I sat at my desk, the same desk Chloe had once tried to steal from me, calm and silent while the entire office buzzed with shocked whispers. Everyone knew something massive had happened, but few knew the full story. Later that week, law enforcement got involved. David's financial crimes weren't just violations of company policy. They were federal offenses. The company pressed full charges for embezzlement and corporate fraud. David was arrested. Chloe vanished from the industry entirely. A month later, I was officially promoted. Director of Operations, the position that should have been mine from the start. But now, it wasn't just a job title, it was justice. The CEO personally thanked me for my professionalism and courage, offering not only the promotion but a substantial bonus for protecting the company from what could have been complete disaster. And as for David, he lost his job, his career, his reputation, and soon, his freedom. Sometimes people think they're untouchable, that they can cheat, lie, and steal while everyone looks the other way. But David learned something the hard way. You never know who's quietly watching, and sometimes the person you betray is the one who holds your entire future in their hands. And while they both lost everything, I walked away with my dignity and my career. Thank you for listening to my story. What is your story? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.